Welcome to Cancer Council's Cancer Update Series, the first talk for 2018. My name is Melissa Ledger. I'm the Cancer Smart Manager at Cancer Council Western Australia. Before we start the talk, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Noongar Wadjuk people. I'd like to pay respect to elders both past and present, and offer my acknowledgement and respect to Aboriginal people that may be in the room today. So today we have a really different update from any of the previous talks we've given here, and if anyone's been a regular to our Cancer Update series, I think you'll agree that today is going to be really different. Often we have researchers, clinicians, people with professor at the front of their title, and today we have two wonderful people who've agreed to tell us their story of their living and managing with a terminal illness. So we're just so delighted and thankful that we've met Susi and Sandy so that they can share their story, not just with us in the auditorium today, but also to people online who'll get a chance to hear the recording and see the slides as well. So with that in mind, when we get to the questions, I'll ask that you wait for the roving mic. The microphone's really poppy, so stand back is my advice to our speakers today. I'm not going to do any further introductions for Susi and Sandy. I think their story will speak for itself. So, as I mentioned, we're just really pleased that they're able to do that for us today. First, the other bit of housekeeping I do need to just mention is the mobile phones. Please make sure they're to silent. I know they're an important communication device, but I certainly don't want mine to be the one that goes off today, so I'll do that as soon as I sit down. We've got about 45 minutes of talking and some 15 minutes or so at the end as well for some questions. And I think that's enough from me, and I'd like you to please welcome Susi and Sandy. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming along to our talk today. We'd always like to start with a disclaimer, which is that we don't have the answers to surviving a terminal illness. All we have is a story of what we've done to manage so far and living in a very conscious state of uncertainty. We want to acknowledge that there's a huge range of knowledge and expertise in the room with us, and thank you for the space to tell our story. We also want to say that at the outset that I do talk about the palliative care doctors a wee way through the talk and about being given time frames, and that I'd asked them for that information, and that I needed, being from New Zealand, we needed time for family to get here if we were kind of starting to get towards the pointy end of the proceedings. So I didn't take their answer as fact, merely as an indication that things weren't too good at the moment. The reality, of course, is that we're all going to die. None of us know how or when, but having a terminal diagnosis puts dying in the foreground and can be the start of new opportunities, new conversations, and ways of being together and alone.
There's been two descriptions that we've both used to describe how we're feeling at times through this journey. Suze likes to call it an adventure. So we're on an adventure together. And the first one was the freight train that blasted through our lives when we heard the diagnosis. And it felt like this was an out-of-control machine roaring and smashing through our lives and leaving everything changed in its wake. The other is the roller coaster ride, which we will talk a little bit more about later. But I think one of the most important things is to realise that we were both in this together, even though we've been partners for 22 years. I think I said this morning 11 years, but 11 years we've been in Australia. We've been together 22 years. And so I think that helps sort of understand a little bit about where we're coming from.
I thought that it just meant that I was completely forgettable to be halved in terms of how long we've been together. So just very quickly, just to kind of go through kind of what the beginning looked like. And so this was mid-January 3 years ago, in fact. So I'm a sprightly 45-year-old. I've got hair. It's not all grey. I was swimming 8Ks a week. I was doing yoga twice a week. I was walking up to 20Ks a week. I was eating well, very rarely drinking, and I'm feeling really good. But apart from what I think is a little bit of Christmas bloating, I thought maybe I had a few too many beers and they're just still not processing. And, this is sort of the nature of this condition. And this is the birth of our first granddaughter. So unfortunately, her birthday sort of coincided with the anniversary a little bit. So it keeps reminding us about life and death and that they go on in parallel. So February 2015, I'm diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. I was given 2 to 4 weeks to live, and I was told it was non-recoverable. And that straight away I was into what was called palliative chemo. So it's not that it's treatable, it's really just about chemo to manage the symptoms. Then 2016, I was given 4 to 6 weeks to live. October, again, last year, told inoperable palliative, and then from there on I've been having fun riding a few bowel obstruction waves, that each one potentially a tsunami. So that's sort of the chain of events of where we're at the moment. I'm currently under hospice care. I've got a hospice at home, carrying my little pain pump, but not doing too badly on the whole. When we organised this talk with Grace, I had to say, I'm actually in hospice care at the minute. May need to delay the talk a little while. I'll get back to you, sort of watch this space. So anyway, in the beginning, the doctors at Fiona Stanley said, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Then I bounced to King Eddie's, then to St John of God's, and when I was at St John of God's, I was in a share room when the palliative care team came in. They introduced themselves, and I thought, they can't possibly be here to me. I've only just got here. I only got here the day before. And the woman in the bed next to me was 75, told me she'd just been re-diagnosed with lung cancer. And so in my head, it made much more sense for them to see her. And so I was really shocked when they said they'd come to see me, and I actually went quiet. Sandy did really well. She got on the front foot and sort of said, we didn't know we were already at that stage. You know, we'd literally been told you've got cancer somewhere, you've got ovarian cancer, you've got terminal ovarian cancer, you've got 2 to 4 weeks to live. That was what a month looked like. So it was quite a roller coaster. So my roommate was sitting behind the curtain hearing the conversation with the palliative care team. I didn't know it at the time, but she was quietly been going out on her day leave, filling up her water bottle with vodka. So she was sitting there, they're going blah, 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 disaster, and she's going, oh, thank God it's not me. And then when everyone had gone that night, she sort of poked her head around the corner and asked me if I wanted a drink. So it was very funny. I don't know if you want to say that.
I think the thing that I found really difficult was when the palliative care team came in, because I was just like, what are you doing here? And, you know, sometimes they take you aside as the other person. And so I was taken aside and I said, I don't know why you're here. Can you explain? Because we don't really need palliative care right now. And they said, yes, you do. This is not recoverable. And it was like a real sort of wow moment. It sort of took me back, and it made me start to think maybe we aren't going to get out of this. We're not going to be that lucky. So I think that was a good moment, even though it was a shocking moment, because it did motivate us.
Yeah, it definitely made us kind of wake up pretty quickly to the moment, and also start thinking about, well, what can we do? And that's sort of how this talk's evolved. Sorry, I should put a disclaimer for this one. This is my belly. I call her Blossom for obvious reasons. So this is what I first looked like I got ascites, which is quite common with ovarian cancer. You basically fill up with fluid around the organs. So I had 17 litres of fluid in me, almost a keg. I look like I'm about to birth an elephant any minute. I'm begging the staff to do something, because I literally just kept filling up, and it was crushing my lungs, and I was finding it incredibly hard to breathe. Begging the staff to do something, and they were meant to get someone to drain us, but then the hospital had just opened and they didn't know who could do that, and then they didn't have a jar that was big. It was just a nightmare. And also awful for Sandy too, feeling so powerless.
Yeah, it was a pretty terrifying moment actually, and it's the worst seeing your partner so unwell. And I became one of those demanding, questioning family members that drive nurses and doctors crazy. And I just started bossing the nurses around and demanding things and demanding answers from the doctors who weren't really able to give us a lot of answers because they hadn't been able to test the fluid, so they couldn't tell us all these things that I actually wanted to know. So it's a very helpless feeling, and there was nothing I could do to fix it except stomp around the passageways, growling about nurses.
Yeah, and trying to get some idea of, well, when might you know, when can they do it, try to get some momentum, really. So at this stage, so they did drain the fluid. At this point, the only option is straight to chemo. I could have eaten a room full of broccoli and carrots and juice had a room full of juice, and it would have made a blind bit of, wouldn't have made any difference. So chemo was the only chance to get on top of the fluid and to try to get it reabsorbed. So from day one, this is what you can control. You can't control what's going on around you, but you can control your response, or choose how you respond. So from day one, I decided I was going to love that chemo. I was like, yeah, baby, pour it in. And I used to make a song about having chemo, yummy, yummy chemo in my tummy, and I used to sing that song as I was driving to chemo to just put out that whole kind of positive yumminess, welcoming it in, kind of. And your mind doesn't know that's you can fool your mind by telling it very deliberately that you're going to love it. I didn't know what it would do for me apart from losing my hair, but I told myself whatever it was I would manage. I would just keep adapting and surviving. I used the mind-body connection to try to make peace with this new body of mine. That wasn't easy to do. I'd usually been very strong and physically fit, and suddenly having a shower and getting dressed was quite exhausting. But just started adding things on, doing the dishes, go for a walk to the end of the street. My body didn't need me to berate it and go, come on, you silly thing, what are you doing, go away. It just needed me to be gentle with myself and to adapt with what each day may bring. And I think that's been the great learning along the way, and is still the learning, is how to learn loving kindness and self-compassion. Be kind to myself, may I accept myself just as I am. Yes, I'm changed in terms of probably everything, but I'm still okay. And John Kabat-Zinn says, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. And I just kept saying that out loud. Another friend had sent, I think it's from Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. I'll just keep doing that too. So just very quickly, just about, often we don't talk about death and dying in society. We think if we talk about it, then it might happen. So there can be a bit of a collective fear about talking about it. So we have started, opening up these conversations, and thank you to our beautiful friends and family that have been walked alongside through those conversations in those really rough times and been there. So what did we do? I guess that's the main focus on, to feel like that the stuff that you can do and what's a powerless process. So the other analogy I have is Everest. It's like this is my Everest. I didn't set out to climb Everest. I was just going about life every day, but nonetheless here I am. So how can I guide myself along on this journey? So just being really aware that health is not it's a holistic process. It's not just physical, and often the focus is on the physical aspects, but I was aware that I needed to tend to the physical, the mental, emotional, social and spiritual as well, and dealing with the emotions as they come up and just kind of riding those, the shock, the fear, the sadness, the terror, celebrating what I had done, being able to cry, have hugs, all of those important things.
We picked the roller coaster because we think that that is the thing that we constantly talk about being on, is a roller coaster ride. And we know that one of the things that you do on a roller coaster is hang on tight, and sometimes some people are crazy enough to let go. And I think that what we've learnt is that that's what we needed to do all the way through this, was learn when to hang on tight and when to let go. We have gone through lots of highs and lows. Even though we've brought a lot of lightness to this talk, there has been some really terrifying and really sad moments. But we've managed to do those together, and I think that that's the key. And it's taught us that letting go is actually okay. The world doesn't fall apart.
So what did we do? So we just talked about like how to activate your power-ups on your worst day, like what can make you feel a little bit better, even if it's just for 5 minutes. It just helps remind you that I can feel differently than what I feel right now, and what I feel right now will also pass. So it's really important to get palliative care involved sooner rather than later, because they're very good at pain management, and if you can get on top of the pain, then you can have quality of life. And they also work very much with you in terms of how can we kind of get you off things as well. Like we've spoken with Sylv Shane about, can we get a bung in this so then I can like go for a swim? And they were like, yes, we'll show you, we'll get you some bungs and we'll show you how to do that. So it's like, cool, just to be able to unplug for a little bit and just stand in the sea, you know, float along the sea. Fantastic. So yeah, palliative care have been essential in terms of managing those side effects and the chemo. We did lots of other alternative therapies like homeopath, naturopath, chiro, massage, yoga, Reiki, very much into adapt and move. It's about doing what's right for your body, and if you can stand more stress and heal faster if you physically move. And sometimes, I was so knackered I could barely, get from the bed. But just like sitting in the chair and waving my arms around and going like this with my legs and, doing a few stretches in the chair, just all of those things can just help and just remind you that actually there's parts of this body that are really strong and are really okay. And there's the odd bit that's not working so well at the moment. But look at this. I did a minute of that versus 10 seconds of it yesterday, and build on those successes. They get a momentum of their own. Wave your arms in the chair, dance in the lounge. I'm glad the neighbours couldn't see over the fence, but crank up the music. I Will Survive. It was a great one to dance around the house to. Hug the dog, walk to the letterbox. Do whatever.
I actually thought this was a great chance to get a cleaner, because I thought, awesome, because the cancer support suggested, would you need a cleaner? And I'm going, yes, that'd be great. And Susan's going, I need to contribute, so no, we're not having a cleaner. So that was the end of the cleaner.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Yeah. It was important to feel like I'm contributing, because I just felt like I was a bit of a drain on our resources. But, if I can do the dishes, that's cool. And then I can see that I've done the dishes, and that makes you feel good. And it might take all day to, get them done and then dried and put away. But that's okay, just a little bit at a time. Mental and emotional. So this was quite a big one for me, just in terms of my ovarian cancer is genetic, so I've inherited it from my mother. And she was diagnosed 10 years ago, and she was given the opportunity to have a blood test to find out if it was genetic, if we were predisposed, even though there was not a significant history. And apparently she turned down that opportunity. I'll never know why, because they wouldn't do the blood test on me, because there's no point testing me. Like, you need to test sort of the oldest member of the generation, because if it is there, then you can trace it better. And the doctors were like, there's such low chances. So I had to deal with a lot of anger and sadness that had happened. That opportunity was lost and well and truly gone. I was straight into stage 4, a couple of weeks to live. My mother's still going, and her ovarian cancer is fine. She's 89 now. So I also made doubly sure that the rest of the family all knew about it, and everybody's been genetically tested, and we've inherited. So just don't think it's a woman's gene as well. We inherit it from my grandfather. There's a connection with prostate cancer. So yeah, please, if you've got any history of breast cancer, ovarian cancer in your family, do talk about getting the blood test, because really it's the only way you can find out, and then you can be proactive in terms of having a hysterectomy, or at least keeping an eye on it. So yeah, a lot of emotions that needed to be dealt with, fear as well of, oh my God, this is it, and what's it going to be like, because to that point it had been pretty sore and pretty awful. We got into a mixture of being and doing. I was worried about Sandy and how she'd manage financially. And with the privilege of time, I wanted to decrease that burden on her as much as possible. So I did some of the practical things. We did our wills. I did advanced healthcare plans. We sorted out the banking, superannuation, found out that we could get a terminal illness payment from our super, then rang around every super that I'd ever had to see whether they still had the clause there. I chose my coffin. I chose my funeral director. We had meetings with them, contacted friends and family. Lots of practical stuffs around organising a funeral, which then became a memorial, because we figured out we couldn't get the coffin into the venue, because it had to be stood up, and that doesn't work. So it's important to have time in with those emotions, focus on what you can do, have those lovely reflections with people and you've met along the way. Talk about the emotions. Sometimes they can be overwhelming, and I think it's important to not stay too stuck in them as well. Like, you need to cry and you need to scream and you need to yell and stomp your feet and whatever, but it's also important not to stay stuck there and to come back to what do we know right now, and how can we be in this moment, how would we like to be in this moment. Because I didn't want to be angry and bitter. Yeah, and also so fearful in terms of I'd had 2 pretty close shaves by this point and felt like fearing of what the end might look like.
I think one of the things that we also recognised was that fear can probably kill you faster than the cancer will. And so one of the things that I really admire about Susie was that she hasn't allowed that fear to creep in too much at all. From my perspective, I hate the term carer. We're in a relationship, we're in a partnership, and I'm not Susie's carer, and I resent being called that. And I think the health profession does that a lot, and I think I've been guilty of it myself at work. For me to have some semblance of mental health through all of this, I went back to work. I needed to find somewhere that had a bit of structure to it, that I'm a planner, and so my need to have my days organised and planned was really important. And so being back at work gave me that semblance of order, and it also gave me a break. My life wasn't revolved around cancer. There were other things that I could talk about and think about, and there were also other things that I could bring home to talk about. And I think that was really important. We were really lucky that Cancer Council gave us somebody that would come and be with Susie when I was at work, because then I wasn't sitting at work worrying about her and checking my phone every 5 minutes to see whether she's okay. So it was really helpful. We've had Silver Chain Hospice that we still have, and they've been absolutely amazing. And what they've done for me as the partner here has been, I didn't have to worry myself. I could actually ring someone and talk to them and say, this is what's happening, what do you think? Should you come or shouldn't you? And they've come 24/7. We've called them at all sorts of hours, and they've been amazing. I think one of the other things was important was that both of us went to the appointments together, because 2 listening ears is really important, because I would hear things, Susie would hear things, and I'd go, did they really say that? I'm sure I heard something else. And so we were able to take notes and be prepared, and I think that was really helpful. One of the things there as a planner, and somebody described me as a realistic optimist, and I'm not really sure what that is, but I think what I found was actually learning to stay in the moment was the most important thing, and that's the biggest challenge, but it's been the most rewarding thing to do, is stay in the moment, because I didn't want to start grieving. Because if I started grieving before I needed to grieve, I was going to be spoiling the moment that I had with Suze, and I didn't want to do that. So I made a determined effort to not grieve. When it creeps in, I just go, no, not now. You can wait.
In saying that, though, we are aware that we are both grieving and grieving differently, and that's a continuous process, and we do talk about it when it comes up, because it is important to talk about it, but sometimes it's important to have space from it too. So this just it looks like the Starship Enterprise or something, but this was just to remind me that when it's rough, just to hold on, and that our minds, that our moods are like the clouds, that they do pass, and they will change. And I just have to keep breathing and get through the lows. And this means just find joy, have some time out, even if it means Googling cute animal pictures and just having a laugh from the heaviness of it. It's important to do that too.
So cute.
Who doesn't love a scalloping baby elephant? So socially also, that this has been hugely important. When I was first diagnosed, we lived quite far away, and predominantly young families. Everybody I knew was at work. I'd lost my job. Everybody else was working, and I was very isolated. So I kept structuring my day by going to cancer support, which was in Cottesloe. It's now Solaris Cancer Care in Cottesloe, just to build in some new skills in terms of doing some writing, some meditation, but meeting other people in a similar situation who could just really get it and just hold that authentic sort of space of, ain't it awful, but this isn't all it is, it's a whole lot of other amazing experiences too, and some of the people I've met on the way have just been totally inspiring, and I'm ever grateful for them, for their honesty and their generosity and sharing how they're getting through as well. But the other great thing is it's not just focused on cancer, it's fun stuff. So, started doing singing group, finding positive people to be around, find your tribe. You will lose people along the way, and it's inevitable, and just kind of let them go. They're not able to be there at the moment for whatever reason, and sort of wish them well. Get strength from your tribe. Reach out to someone you care about every day in some way, and that can be just, again, a really simple thing like doing words with friends, which is like Scrabble on your phone or something. Just, I play Scrabble with my cousin in Hawke's Bay in New Zealand. She's really good though. So I keep ignoring her, so she should. But just it helps build that trust, build that connection, and it's a good fun. So this is sort of spiritual for agnostics, so someone who doesn't believe in God at all. So where do I get my soul food? And how do I do that? From who? Where do I get my sense of connection and belonging? And for me, it's tapping into the earth, into the environment. So floating in the sea, sitting on the beach, sitting on the ground, just lying on the beach. So just learning to tune into myself, learning to calm my body, as it helps also to relax my mind. So just lie down there and take a few deep breaths and just tune into what you can see around you. Use your mind to help with your body. Feel the healing. Feel the wind on your face. Feel the sun on your back. It's lovely, and it just helps ground you, and it helps keep you strong. So these next two slides capture sort of the dual reality of both planning for death and for life. So this is 4 weeks into a prognosis of having 4 to 6 weeks to live. I'm at home. That sexy thing is a nasogastric tube. Really not that comfortable. At this stage I can't eat. I have a line in my arm giving me pain relief. My parents and my brother have flown in to say goodbye, as have some of my friends from New Zealand. We're talking with the palliative care team about where I wish to die, and that I wanted them to be proactive with the pain relief. So this is your opportunity to have your say and influence in terms of what do you want, how do you want that end bit to look, as much as you can, sort of help shape it. We've met the woman running the funeral service, but at the same time as I'm having these conversations about palliative care, about where to die and pain relief along the way and those sorts of things, I'm also talking to them about getting out of palliative care alive. And that would quite like to go to Vietnam, throw something into the mix, it keeps them on their toes. So then we started finding out about what would we need to get to Vietnam, and there was the whole issue of the opiate medication, and that needing, it'd be a real shame to get all that way and get shot at the border for carrying in hydromorphone or something. So Sandy had been looking for sort of we'd had this deal through Luxury Escapes that we hadn't been able to book, and then we just thought, well, do we? Yes, we do. So this is sort of a month later in Vietnam, climbing up in the hills up there. Damn hot though, but beautiful. So what are our key things? So manage that fear and anxiety. Be really proactive about it. The other thing I did was created some anchors, which are good for scans, because when you've got your scan coming up, it sort of hangs over your head, it starts to twinkle into your consciousness. So how can you manage that and influence? So I really ground myself. I use anchors. I kind of hold onto my hands like this when I'm in there. I deep breathe. I use imagery, so I take myself away to places that I've really loved and imagine being there. And I don't even really notice that the scan's going on. I don't like being turned into a patient, as soon as they get there and they put the red band on and they put the sexy gown on, and I try to avoid all that. So I've worked out that I can wear clothes that don't have any metal in them into some of the scans. So I turn up in my clothes, I go in, have the scan, I come out in my clothes, I chuck the band off as quickly as possible, and I'm free. It's just, I'm not sick, I've just gone there for a scan, and that's all I needed to do today. It's the same with chemo. It's just something I do on Thursday afternoon. I give it sort of as much attention as that, even though chemo does remind you that it wasn't just on Thursday afternoon, it affects Friday, Saturday, Sunday too, sometimes, to some degree. But it's unpredictable. So again, just going with the flow. And value what is. Start finding the fun, not finding the faults. It's too easy to find the faults, and I kind of feel that's the job of the doctors, to tell me what's wrong with me, whereas I'd like to tell them what's right with me, to which they just grin. But especially with this each moment of extra time, I feel like I'm more awake than I've ever been.
I think staying in the moment, I think we're repeating ourselves quite a bit today, but staying in the moment is a real discipline. It's not something that just comes to you. You have to really practice it. And I think keeping a sense of humour, we've found most days we've got something to laugh about, even if it is ourselves. Organising holidays, I think that's really important. Even anything that's manageable is really important because it gives us both something to look forward to, and as a planner it gave me something to plan and have control over that it didn't have before. And I think having positive people around you is so important. If people aren't positive, you don't need them at a time like this. You really need positive people who are supportive. And creating memories, I think that's the other thing that we have been really clear about doing.
Yeah. I think also you do run the risk of getting cabin fever, when you are a bit sort of housebound. So just even if it's getting out for a drive or just going and parking the car at the beach and smelling the sea, all of those things, just a little bit of time out somehow, some way, drives here and there is all good.
Right, some of you might recognise this, Kubler-Ross. I know it's an oldie, but I think it's a real goodie, and it explains how loss and change affects people. And I'm sure some of you will recognise this. Everybody reacts differently to change, and we found that we were certainly reacting differently to from each other in this process. It's nice. It's not a nice linear journey either. It's people can be anywhere on this change curve, and what we found was talking was so important, and being really honest with each other. Because I think listening and talking to each other enabled us to manage some of the shock and the denial, but the frustration at times as well, frustration that we didn't know. And I think what I came to realise was that there's uncertainty everywhere, but I didn't actually realise that before. I thought I had certainty. I don't know why, I just did. And so finding that I didn't has been, has sort of forced me into, okay, well, I need to just stay with what I know right now. And that was really important. Having time to grieve, both of us have lacked energy at times, and we've just shut the door and gone into our cave at home and just, had that quiet time, which I think was really important. I think having... looking at that, it says about experiment and the initial engagement, and we were like, why would we want to engage with this new situation? But we needed to adapt, and we needed to survive. And Susan's often said, I need to adapt and survive, and she has. I think decision making, being able to decide on what we could control was really important, and then integrating some of the living instead of thinking about the dying was so important for both of us.
So just also watch for the depression, obviously, because it's hard enough without getting really low, but it's understandable to be a bit low about it at times. And let go of toxic people and toxic energy. You can feel the energy people bring with them when they're around you, and who's picking you up and who's kind of not enabling you to kind of move and keep growing. And you'll find authentic people, and we've got lots of lovely authentic people with us on our roller coaster. Bless them, holding on and yahooing along through it. And just waking up to those moments. And a lot of really good moments have occurred in really tough times, The funeral director still talks about telling us off for laughing about the coffin, standing up and thinking that was going to work.
She suggested that we be more
take it seriously.
decorous about a funeral.
So so Sandy talked about like having breaks and getting away. So this is last year. We went to Europe and had 6 weeks there. We were originally having 8, but the cancer was back, and it meant go for 6. I guess it's less likely for things to go kind of belly up, and come back, and we'll start review the situation, rescan, review the situation. So we're very much there with a very clear. We've got 6 weeks, and we're going to enjoy it and do everything and anything that we can. Just be guided by how I felt on the day. It was also finding out which countries have reciprocal health arrangements, because nobody would give me travel insurance, not even the specialist cancer providers. So find out who's got a reciprocal health plan with Australia. And then we had a camper van, so then we're just going to drive like the clappers to get to Italy, for example, and try to turn up an Italian hospital, try to explain the situation. And so, yeah, and I thought this quote really summarises it. This is my boots at 2,500 metres. I've walked up this valley. We both did. But I wished to live deliberately, and not when I came to die to discover that I had not lived. I wanted to live deep and suck all the marrow of life. I just love that. As that's exactly what we very consciously did. So again, this is sort of holding on to these two positions. We went from climbing in the mountains in France to being strapped up to the chemo again. Both of those things, we go from fit and well to sick and dying kind of in the blink of an eye. And people, I feel like, is it the boy who cried wolf? Because I keep going, I'm dying. They've only given me a few weeks. Oh, I'm back. Oh, nope, dying again. And oh, nope, back. And so it's been sort of just bizarre. So just what changes is the foreground. When I'm sick, I'm really sick. When I'm well, I'm really well. And I'm really grateful for that. But it does make the roller coaster swings quite extreme and quite sudden and chaotic.
When we were preparing this talk, we got a magazine from New Zealand that we get quite regularly, and it's called Womankind. And there were 5 principles in it relevant to death and all sorts of sort of transitions and crises. And I thought they particularly spoke to me anyway. The first one is, don't wait. And I think that was one of the things that this was like a secret teacher for me, teaching me that living in each moment is all we have. And I've learnt to stop wasting time on meaningless activities like housework, and to be present and grateful for the time I have with those, because that's all we've really got right now. And I believe in dealing realistically with what I know and not what I don't know. So living in the moment takes real practice. When I read Welcome Everything, I was thinking, I'm not going to be welcoming this. That was quite confronting because I didn't want to welcome this into our lives. I think Suze was a much better example of that. I just wanted to simply be open to what is happening, and I always like certainty. So when I was faced with this uncertainty, I was initially resistant, and I couldn't picture a life without my soulmate in it. And I spent some time talking with a friend, and I kept saying, I don't think I'm going to be able to cope. I can't see what life will be like without Susie in it. And she just said to me, you will cope. Quite abruptly, she just said, you will cope. And I thought about it quite a bit, and I thought, if I stay in the moment, I'm probably likely to be more receptive and open to people and opportunities. And I found that my coping mechanisms strengthened and I managed much, much better. I've always prided myself on appearing to cope, being capable and strong and independent. And I didn't want to be seen as vulnerable and frightened and needing assistance from others. And I remember at one point when Susie was first diagnosed that I just wanted to be sick, and I was running to the bathroom and to be sick, and she was going, you can't, you haven't got time for that. It was like, I need a wee bit of time out. So I went into the bathroom and I just stood there feeling like I didn't quite know what to say or do, and I felt like the world was falling apart. And I just stood there, and I thought, I need to stop being resistant to this. This is what is happening to us. And I was able to sort of acknowledge that I was really scared, and we both cried together. And our family and friends have been really open to us talking like that too. And I think that has been so important, and being able to stay authentic through this adventure that Suze calls it, and not deny how I'm feeling. Finding a place of rest in the middle of things was something that I thought, you only do when you've finished your to-do list. And meditation, I found, is my best antidote to all the chaos that's going on around. And so when I was travelling to work, I could get 10 minutes, 20 minutes on the train. And most people in the mornings are not talking. They're usually on their phone. So, playing with whatever Facebook that they're looking at. And so I was able to use meditation really well on the train. And that gave me my, place of rest. Pilates does that as well. I go off to Pilates because I can't concentrate on being able to breathe and move my body at the same time and think of something else. I just can't do that. So Pilates was really good. And the first coffee of the day, that lovely smell and aroma, and that first sip is just awesome. So those are my places of rest. Cultivating a don't know mind. I think you have heard us both talking a lot about that today, is the mindfulness, and that's one of often curiosity and surprise and wonder, and it's sort of kind of being receptive to whatever's going to come up. And I found on this adventure, keeping my mind open to possibilities enabled myself to manage the roller coaster ride and not be so limiting on myself. I am free to discover my capacity to manage, and through this, I think, be more compassionate and open.
I was going to say something really amazing then. Blame the chemo quickly.
I did tell Suze to pick it up at one point.
Yes, she did actually. I've only got a few weeks left. Well, pick it up then. You get out and you get a job. Yeah, good one. But yeah, just kind of keeping laughing where you can. Welcome everything just as it is. So come back to, even when they tell you the worst possible news and you ask the hard conversations about what might that look like, just come back to, well, what do we know right now and where are we at right now? Because that's the only bit I know for sure. So I'm just going to keep my focus and my attention here, because it could go in any ways. Just because I've got cancer doesn't mean I'm going to die of cancer. So we could have spent the day telling you what's wrong with me, and we have a little bit. But instead, hopefully, we've focused on telling you what is right with me. Not fault-finding, but fun-finding. If you focus on the negative and then you see the negative and you feed the negative, if I'd focused on my anger, I could have stayed stuck there. Instead, I've learnt forgiveness and compassion. Being stuck and angry, it wasn't going to be useful. It wasn't going to be nice to be around either. I didn't want to be that angry, resentful person. I've never said, why me? It just is, and just get on with how it is. The same with the pain, just sort of notice it, acknowledge it. Sometimes I need to, this is my learning, it's still trying to be proactive in attending to the pain sooner rather than later. And, use your mind, to influence what you can. Sorry. Make that stop. You're in charge of where you choose to put your attention and your energy, so choose where you do that and be deliberate in it. I'll just let you read that because nobody says it as well as the Dalai Lama. Remember most days you don't die. So how do you want to live well? And what's that going to look like? How can you tend to yourself, your house, kind of nurture yourself physically, emotionally, socially and spiritually? Same with your mate. You know. So coming back to Snoopy, most days you don't die. So our question to you all is, how do you want to live well? So that's us. Thank you.
Wow, it's hard to come up here really now and say, has anyone got any questions? I think just a few moments to think about just the incredible story and insight that Sandy and Susie have shared with us today. As I've said, we've had lots of scientists and researchers up here telling us about the findings of their large studies, but to hear directly from two people who've been affected and living and managing their terminal illness is really, so important. And I work at the Cancer Council. I've worked there for a long time, and that's what we're there for. We're there to try and prevent cancer where we can, find cancer early when we can, and tell people how to do that. But we're also there for those people who need support and information as well. And just, it was such a privilege when we got the call last week, yes, let's do this. Thought, yep, let's do it. And just with, 5 days' notice, we've brought together some people who I think have heard a really amazing story today. So if anyone does have any questions for Sandy and Susie, we've got a few minutes left. In fact, we've got about 10. And so there's lots of opportunities to ask some questions. We've got a roving mic. I just ask you to wait for that. If you pop your hand up, we'll bring it to you.
That photo is Mont Blanc, and that's us standing in front of it.
Susie, I've got a question for you. My name's Anne. Were there ever any times, and it's a hard question maybe, but were there ever any times when you felt angry that you might be dying but your partner would go on living after you for a while?
Did I feel angry about that? No. You just never know how it's going to play out in terms of who's going to go first. There's no guarantees around that. So I think we were both, and there still isn't. I mean, I keep being given time frames, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be true either. So no sense of anger, sense of sadness, and that we're not going to be together, and that I didn't see it going this way, at this time, so soon, I suppose. I've only been together 22 years, it's early. So, there was, I don't know if it was anger, it was sadness, I think, more.
I'd just like to make a comment about your attitude on how you've actually received chemotherapy. It's given me a better insight, even though I've had it earlier, but I couldn't cope with it the second, the next lot of sessions.
Yeah.
But I really admire your positivity, and that's what I take away from today. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah. I don't know why, but I seem to love chemotherapy. The more poisonous it is, I'm just like, fantastic. Give me healthy stuff. It actually does make me sick. Weird. I tried the juicing, vomited it everywhere. So, but poisonous, love it. Yeah, the doctors think I'm weird. Every chemo they give me, I seem to do okay, and I've done stuff to actively manage the side effects of the chemo as well. As I should be bald, but I went to the homeopath and got some drops, and should be bald as badger. A few times over.
Well, Sophie and Sandy, I've been to many of these talks, and this is one of the most inspiring talks that I've heard. So just the way you guys are handling yourselves and inspiring us, and your mind control and your strength and your power and all that. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
That's enough.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just muddling our way along, but try not to take it all too seriously, if that makes sense. But attending to it because it is quite serious at times. Sort of take-home messages people might read.
Just a practical question, I guess. You mentioned that you had somebody come from Cancer Council to sit with you when Sandy went to work, is that right?
Oh, yeah, that was actually, it was from Silver Chain,
Oh, was it?
Hospice,
Okay,
respite.
So was that a volunteer that did that? Or?
Yeah, it was a volunteer, actually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually through her that I got to know about the singing, and then turned up at the singing one day and she's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Hi." 4 months later, I'm playing, I'm hooked up to everything. We're playing cards at home. I think we've got a few weeks. So, yeah, she wasn't expecting me to turn up. I keep surprising people. I'm kind of incognito, because my appearance keeps changing and then I pop up in all sorts of random places. It's good to scare the public. Within reason. Any other sort of take-home messages people are taking away? Just keep breathing is the main thing, obviously. Regardless, just keep breathing.
Hello, my name's Erin, and
Hi, Erin.
I've just completed my third bout of ovarian cancer. But I belong to a support group which we set up ourselves, but
Yeah.
we all met during the exercise group that the Cancer Council arranged in our local area.
Yeah.
So, and we still meet once a month and have a meal together and have a good talk about who's what, where and where, holidays, everything else, and just support each other
Yes.
in that way. And that has been such a great help for us all.
Yeah, I think that's so true. That social support, but also just being with some people that have the same thing and totally get it, and they're all at different stages along the way and have dealt with things differently. There's just such a wealth of knowledge and experience and love and acceptance that anything goes. I've been to those groups. I haven't been for a while. Yeah, no, they were good.
I think we'll call it a day.
Quit while we're here.
Just please join me again and thank you. Just really so thankful that we were able to get you to share your story today. It's just been such a privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.